Welcome to AlphaCars. Today we are checking out the condition of the paint exterior on this 2009 Mercedes G55. We just completed an extensive underbody work. We have a detailed video on that. I can get your peek on, you can see the typical issue with upper shock mounts in the rear. We also did the gas tank and a few other things. Right now we're looking at the condition of the exterior paint. We just completed thorough evaluation and have a list of recommendations. Overall, this particular vehicle is not bad. It definitely has some issues, but luckily they didn't get as bad as we have seen on other G-Class. So we're gonna start with overall condition of paint. Pretty much any vehicle on the road could use paint correction. Paint correction is any type of surface imperfections on paint. We address them, we get rid of them, we make it smooth. And the paint that was just properly serviced for paint correction, it is as smooth as glass and it has no imperfections. And then once we achieve that, there's an option of doing ceramic coating. So this Mercedes definitely has some concerns. One of them, as far as condition of paint, it had some body work done, probably pre-sale improvements were done by Carvana. That's where this vehicle was purchased from. And there's a lot of overspray we can see on the hood, on the fender, and number of panels in a front end, and the whole vehicle, but in the front end in particular. So that's gonna be one thing we're gonna recommend to do is exterior paint correction. Get rid of overspray, some light scratches, polishing, and it will turn this vehicle into just beautiful, gorgeous looking G-Class. And then we're getting into more serious stuff. We're gonna start with the windshield frame. Common area for concerns on G-Class, they start to rust from paint chips that penetrate through the paint and then open up the metal and they start rusting. So in this vehicle, someone, possibly Carvana or someone else, definitely did some body work. We can see sand marks under the clear coat, you can see right there, and it's pretty much throughout the surface. They stopped the paint line on the seam, and while working on this panel, they did a little bit of sanding on the adjacent panel. Also, the transition is pretty abrupt. So right now we're observing paint and clear coat peeling back. And if you don't do anything about it, it will open up the metal and it will start rusting. We're gonna look at different areas. There's actually one area where it's started to rust already. You can see right here, you can see some rust developing, very, very light, but it doesn't take long to get worse. We don't want that. So that's an area of concern that we need to correct and improve. And obviously we're gonna try to do some improvements. There are some paint runs and paint nibs like that. We can definitely make improvements. Some sand marks under the clear coat you can see. And then as we get into the upper area of the windshield frame, again, you can see a typical deficiency for substandard paint work where minimal to no sanding gets down to the adjacent panel, and when the clear coat gets applied, it pretty much goes on unprepared, unsanded, glossy, maybe even oily surfaces. So right now we're seeing that clear coat is peeling off along this edge right there. That can all be improved. You can see right here where it's coming off. If you don't do anything about it, it's just gonna get uglier and it may expose some metal which will start rusting. The next areas we're gonna look at, these are most serious, most common on the G-Class, are the rocker panels. The rocker panels is actually a structural part of your vehicle and it's below the doors. We're gonna start on the passenger side, and we already remove the rocker panel moldings. And as you can see, so the molding pretty much covers from here to here. So we could see a little bit of rust. And as we remove the molding, you can see the rust usually originates in these, under these plastic inserts. And you can see it looks like this plastic insert has no rust, but if we pop it, we're probably gonna see some rust in the actual opening in the rocker panel where the plastic grommet goes in, and then the rust starts to grow from under the grommet and outside, and this area of rust was not visible under the rocker panel molding. So you don't see it until it gets bigger and bigger, like right here. This is pretty much the borderline. That's where the molding was. We could see a little bit. And as you can see, it pretty much flakes. And the rust right now probably extended over here. We've had G-Class where this was rusted through completely. There were holes that we have to fix with welding. You can see now there's definitely a lot of surface rust. So our recommendation would be to obviously grind all the rust off, treat residual rust, and properly protect the treated metal. And that is pretty much true on both sides. We're gonna look at the other one right here, at the other side. Similar situation, a little bit more rust. You can see right here. We're gonna see how far it goes, but we will clean it all off. You can definitely see more on this side. And another common area we always check under these rubber seals, because they, while they seal between the flare and the fender, they also rub against the paint surface on the fender, and eventually they rub through the paint and expose the metal. This one is not that bad, but we're still gonna check all that out. You can see right here. The next area of concern, we're gonna look at the cargo door. Common area. This one is not as bad as we have seen it, but it's definitely getting there. And it's usually where the weather stripping goes in, and when you look at it, it doesn't look bad. In fact, it looks fine. When we started to look at this door, it looked absolutely fine, but since we know where the rust begins, we pulled, and this weather stripping usually glued in lightly, so to inspect it, you'll have to pull it off and unglue it, clean the glue, and reinstall it. Hopefully you don't see any rust, which was not the case with this vehicle. Look at this. And if you don't do anything, this one is getting pretty bad. If you don't do anything, it will literally, the rust will eat away this entire shelf. And it can be repaired. We can reconstruct the shelf from metal, and it's getting thin in a lot of these areas. We may have to do it here, and either from the metal or from fiberglass, but it can be repaired. We will need to do it on this vehicle. We're gonna remove the weather stripping all around the perimeter. Usually it's the bottom edge and the top edge. The top edge on this is not as bad. The rust starts to originate, but it's not nearly as bad. You can see it's happening right here, and there's a little bit on the inside of the shelf. You can see it starts in different areas. We're gonna clean and look at it deeper, but the bottom edge is usually the worst. You also want to look at the door stop pivoting point. It often rusts, so we're going to disassemble it, clean it, and lubricate it. Door hinges, you can see the rust usually begins from the friction point, and it starts to peel the paint. Here are the moldings from the rocker panels. You can see how they attach, and you can see how it's warped, usually from the rust from inside. these moldings on the inside, they have metal and on the inside, and that metal starts to rust. And when you see these moldings are kind of warped and deformed, you usually want to replace them. They're not terribly expensive, and the vehicle looks much, much better with the new moldings. Another common areas are the edges under the low window moldings on the doors. And again, all you need to do is pull this up, and you're going to see usually the rust in these corners. If you don't do anything about it, it could be really bad. It could get as rusty as this. We recently did one G-Class where it was that bad. You also look at just even the little beginning where the paint starts to chip, and it's much easier to touch it up and deal with it when it's a small chip versus when it's a really bad rusty area. So we're gonna go through the door hinges and improve them. They're not that bad on this vehicle at all. And then we have a few small chips on the roof, not uncommon. Large area, on this vehicle, there are a couple of dents, small dents, and where the paint is cracking and it starts to rust. So we're gonna clean that and touch up. Definitely an easy thing to do. Here is passenger side area. You can see similar condition. And another one right here. Again, very, very little over here. Easy to do at this stage. Yeah, you can see where the small chip turns into a rust spot right here. And again, if you don't do anything about it, it's gonna get really bad real quickly. And there are a number of those. You can see another one right here. Let's focus on it. Here it is. Yeah. There are probably a dozen of those on the roof, and a couple of small dents with cracking paint. So that's a good time to take care of that. And another area of a common concern, and that's actually nothing to do with rust. Well, nothing to do with rust on this vehicle, but under the hood, very common area where we need to inspect for rust damage. Again, luckily on this vehicle, there's no rust, but often we will see rust right on the bottom of this edge. This one doesn't have it, which is great. It also doesn't have the sound deadening insulator that goes under the hood. You can see the glue from it, which may look like there's a little bit of rust, but we can clean all that, obviously treat the rust, and apply paint coating, apply new adhesive, and certainly reinstall the sound deadening material. Other areas we look at are going to be the upper radiator support and all these areas. On this G-Class, it's in great condition. One thing we're gonna do, looks like this ground point is a little aged, so we're gonna take that apart and make sure the contacts are nice and clean. A poor ground connection can cause a lot of electrical issues that will lead to some frustration, and could be very expensive diagnostic to get to the bottom of those. We have also rusted areas. You can see right here, there's some miscellaneous spots right in this area where this molding comes down. Again, there's a friction point between the tip of this molding right into the paint, so we always want to check those, and we call it the upper cowl. That's where windshield wipers are, right here. We can also check the other side. This one is in good shape. We're still gonna take a peek, pull that molding and take a look at it. And another common area we check, and I think it's fine on this truck, but we're gonna look at this windshield wiper arm shaft. You wanna make sure, a couple of things here. You wanna make sure there's no rust, number one, right around this bushing. You also wanna make sure that the shaft is not loose and this bushing is not moving. If this bushing is moving, which it isn't on this vehicle, which is great. If this bushing is loose or the gasket is disturbed or not present underneath, the water will start dripping on the inside, and it actually gets on the wiring harness of the engine control module, which leads to a number of issues. So you always want to make sure these are nice and tight, and from time to time it's even good to check those. These are easy to do. Pull that off, and we use a little puller for the arm, and then you can take that apart, clean everything, and often just replace the gaskets as preventive measure. Will save a lot of frustrations and thousands of dollars in possible harness repair. So, and of course, you always check under this gasket. You always check under this gasket. And we pull that up. On this one, we inspected it. So this definitely was repaired. We did not see any rust, any issues. So one thing we're gonna do is, as preventive measure, we are going to recommend to do rust proofing, where we apply a liquid penetrant from the top, across the top, and across the sides and on the bottom. And once that is done, you should not see any rust for years, any new rust developments for years. I think that pretty much wraps it up on this one. One of the things we've done on this vehicle, we just completed also the headliner. It is a common problem with any vehicle, and this one was suede, so it was a lot of work, and it came out awesome. We can see it here from the back. Looks very, very nice.